There's a big difference between something that is inspired by a story and something that is adapted from another story. There's been a lot of conversation surrounding adaptations recently, and I think that we have to kind of distinct what an actual adaptation is. I've kind of already spoke my 2 cents on this with really trying to explain that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing nowadays, even though it is adapted from the comics, it's not really adapted. It's more inspired by the comics, right? It's like we have to look at it on a scale from left to right, and it's inspiration over here and adaptation over here, or adaptation, excuse me. And where that project lies is determined by a lot of factors. We're going to get nerdy here, so if you're not down to get nerdy, I don't know what to tell you. In my opinion, things that can be considered an adaptation is like if the writer of a comic then also makes the movie. Like, not if it's made by someone else. Like, no, if the same creator is behind that project in the different installments that it gets, that is an adaptation because they're adapting it from the comics to the movies, from the movies to you know what I mean? That's more of an adaptation. And then an inspiration or something that is inspired by another story is more on par with like stuff like Cinderella and all of those stories that we grew up with as kids, right? None of those are adaptations of the other stories. They are inspired by those stories. That's why they're not as nearly dark or as nearly just filled with the horrendous things that happen to all the characters in those stories. So in that sense, it's like, okay, this is inspired by this story. But when you are adapting something, that's more akin to like The Last of Us, actually, is a good point to make, right? The creator of the game is also behind the show, but that's because he adapted it from one form of media to the other form of media. And that's why it's like, okay, in that sense, yes, this is an adaptation, but it's also like you can have things be two things where you end up with an adaptation that is inspired by something. And I feel like that's where the MCU's sweet spot is. The MCU adapts different comics into movies, but they're just inspired by all the comics. They're not really adapting the story. You know what I mean? And within the context of this conversation, that's why Star Wars is so unique, at least this era of Star Wars, right? Because everything is one story. They're not adapting things into other stuff. They're telling one story. The video games that are Lego video games, mind you, are really the only things that kind of adapt the story, that are an adaptation of Star Wars. I think it really boils down to the fact that most things that are inspired by something are more of a retelling of that story, as to where adaptations are more close to what